You are not tired, you are overloaded. The kind of exhaustion sleep doesn't fully fix. There are days where you sleep enough, technically do everything right, and still wake up tired. Just heavy. Like your mind never completely stopped running. And the strange part is that you start questioning yourself, because nothing looks wrong from the outside. You slept, you rested. So why do you still feel drained? Why tiredness is not always physical. Most people hear tired and immediately think about sleep. But not all exhaustion comes from lack of rest. Sometimes it comes from constant input, constant decisions, constant mental switching. Your brain rarely gets a real pause anymore. Even during breaks, something is still happening. The day starts before you even realize it. You wake up and your attention is already being pulled somewhere. Notifications, schedules, unfinished tasks, things you forgot yesterday, things you need to remember later. None of it feels overwhelming on its own. That's the important part. It's the accumulation that creates the pressure, a feeling that builds quietly. I've noticed this during busy school weeks. Not extremely stressful, just full ones. Classes, assignments, messages, things to remember. Constant switching between tasks. My mind just feels crowded. Like there's no space left to think clearly. Why your brain never fully settles. The brain is constantly processing information, even when you think you're resting. Scrolling through videos, checking messages, listening to something in the background, it feels passive, but your attention is still active. This raises a question. If your mind is always processing something, when does it actually recover? The difference between rest and escape. A lot of what feels like rest now is really distraction. You move from one form of input to another, from work to social media, from stress to entertainment. But your brain is still engaged the entire time. So instead of recovering energy, you're just changing where your attention goes. Why overload feels like low motivation? Mental overload often disguises itself as laziness or lack of discipline. You sit down to do something simple, and suddenly it feels harder than it should. Not because the task is difficult, but because your mind is already carrying too much in the background. The part that doesn't feel obvious at first, what makes overload difficult to notice is that it develops gradually. You adapt to it. Constant stimulation starts feeling normal. Constant thinking starts feeling necessary. And because everyone around you seems busy too, it feels like this is just how life works now. A small moment that makes you notice it. Sometimes you only notice the overload during moments of actual quiet. No phone, no conversation, no task. At first, it almost feels uncomfortable. Your mind keeps searching for something to focus on. That feeling says more than people realize. It shows how unfamiliar stillness has become. Why simplicity feels so powerful. Walking without listening to anything. Sitting outside without checking your phone. Finishing one task without switching constantly. The effect feels bigger than it should because your brain is finally dealing with less. The difference between being busy and being saturated? Being busy is not always the problem. Sometimes the real issue is saturation. Too much information, too many unfinished thoughts, too many open mental tabs at the same time. And eventually, your system stops feeling clear. Why more rest alone doesn't always help. If overload is the problem, then more sleep is not always enough. Sleep matters, but it doesn't remove constant mental pressure by itself. Recovery also depends on reducing the amount of input your brain has to manage throughout the day. The shift that changes everything. There's a small shift that happens when you stop asking, "Why am I so tired?" and start asking, "What am I carrying mentally right now?" That question changes the focus completely. Suddenly, the issue feels less like weakness and more like overload. What happens when you reduce the noise? When you reduce mental clutter, even slightly, your energy changes. Not instantly, not perfectly, but noticeably. Your thoughts feel less scattered. Tasks feel lighter. You stop feeling like every small thing requires effort. Final thoughts. You are not always tired because your body lacks sleep. Sometimes you are tired because your mind never stops processing. Constant input, constant switching, and constant stimulation slowly overload your system until low energy starts feeling normal. And once you recognize that difference, it becomes easier to understand why rest is not just about sleeping more. Sometimes it's about carrying less. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to learn more.